So tell me about you, where you're from, Lebanon origin, fast forward how you reached Australia, and we start from there.
Okay, I was born in Australia. My parents are both from Lebanon. My dad came out when he was 6. He's from a village called Rahayel, apparently next to Zgharta, I think. My mum's from Karam Asfur, and she came out when she was about 17. They got married here, and then I came. Then it was me.
Have you been back to Lebanon?
I went once with mum in '99, just me and mum, and it was, like I've heard Lebanon's beautiful, but still in your head you have this image of war. So you go and you're scared when you go. And when we went, there was a bit of activity. The airport closed, and for an Australian born in Australia, I was petrified. And everyone's like, what are you worried about? They were partying, they didn't care, it was just another day. But you know, for a tourist I was, but then it was like nothing. After a week it was all back to normal, and we were there for 9 weeks. So it was a pretty amazing trip.
So let's start by the end. So we're going to do end to beginning and vice versa. So a book. Why a book? How did you have the idea for the book?
Why a book?
Let's start by the book.
All right. So back in 2013, I was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was going through it, obviously it was a very horrible time for a mum. My youngest was 2. So 2, 7, 9, 3 boys. It was hard. You know, doctors tell you it's a good cancer. Hodgkin's lymphoma, it's a good cancer, but it's not the cancer that kills you. Sometimes it's the chemo that kills you. So going through it was not easy, and I got all the side effects, and I said, I should write a book. I learned so much. It was a fleeting thought, I should write a book, but never developed. I didn't have the passion to do it. You know, I did lots of awareness and fundraising, trying to build awareness and recover from what I went through. But then, you know, fast forward 8 years, when your child is diagnosed with cancer, any parent, you're a parent, God forbid, 1,000 times, any parent could relate to what that feeling might be like when the doctors tell you your healthy child, what looks like a healthy child, has cancer. You know, he was at 15, peak of his life, like organising work experience and, you know, starting to go out with friends. And we just got out of COVID. In Australia, Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. We just got out of that. And then we had to lock down again because he couldn't get sick, and he had stage 4. So his treatment was very harsh for 6 months, and he went through a lot. One day he was sitting in the hospital, and it was test after test, and I looked at him and I thought, this is not fair. Like, you shouldn't be going through this. I think we should write a book. And he goes,
I laughed at her. I go, that's kind of the silliest thing I've heard. But then she's like, no, I'm serious. We should write a book, because she said her biggest regret 8-10 years ago when she had cancer was that she didn't document the experience. She didn't have saved those sort of memories, and so, you know, after a while you start to forget some of them, and she goes, I don't want that to happen for you, so, you know, let's start documenting, and let's write a story.
Yeah, and I kept a diary throughout his whole treatment, because I regretted not keeping one when I went through treatment. And I told him to write. He goes, Mum, I could barely hold a pen and do my homework, because he was zooming in. Because he wanted to be, at this stage, he wanted to be a dentist. So that big ambition, be a dentist. And so he was still zooming into each class because he didn't want to fall behind. Something we learnt from COVID, you can zoom into a classroom. So he goes, no, Mum, I'm struggling to hold a pen, I'm not going to write. So I wrote for the 2 of us. So that was like our first draft of this book, was me writing in our diary. So when it came down to writing, we'd sit there on long days in the hospital. He'd say, Mum, how do you envision this book? I said, I envision it you write from your perspective, and I write from my perspective. Because there are times you tell me that I'm overreacting. I want to know what's going on in your head. And that's what we did. He mapped it out. You write this chapter, I write that chapter. We didn't read each other's work to write at the end. Maybe I was into the last 2 chapters I was writing before I even picked it up. 2 reasons. One, it was sad to read what he was going through. It was sad to actually really feel what he was feeling, because that was what was happening while I was reading it. I could feel what he was feeling. And 2, I didn't want his recollection to affect how I was going to write my version of what happened. So
how old were you when you had cancer?
So I was 15 when I was diagnosed. I just turned 15 a couple months earlier. and then I sort of spent 6 months in the hospital getting treatment, chemotherapy, all that stuff. And so I finished right before I turned 16.
Do you remember mom having cancer before?
I have, yes, I have like very faint memories of the time, because mum said I was only about 7 years old or something. So I have some memories, and when we speak about, in the book, we start with mum's journey through cancer and what I remember from that time. It wasn't much, but I think what I remember is, as a family, just how sort of together we were at the time. So when something like this happens, and it can tear people apart, but at the same time, I remember how it brought us together as a family.
If someone watching us today, probably gentlemen from your age that might have the same experience, or parents that are having the same experience, what happened the first day when you knew it was about, I'm going to die, no, I want to live? What did you feel, and how did you fight against it?
Yeah, so it's really sort of interesting thing for me to process mentally. When the doctors, I was in the doctor's office, and they were looking at the scans, and they're like, yeah, we think it's Hodgkin lymphoma. I was like, I know that's cancer, but I didn't know how bad it was, and so I was trying to like make sense of it. And then I remember the senior oncologist looked, and he was showing us the scans, and we didn't quite know how progressed it was at the time. And he's saying, based on these scans, it could be as bad as stage 4. And I remember at that moment, and I'm like, I was just thinking, 2 days ago, I was just completely happy, healthy boy, and no one knew any different. And now it's like my entire life is changed. And so I guess in that moment, I don't know if I made the choice consciously, but I sort of went into this mode, and I call it in the book, I call it my survival mode. And I stopped processing it mentally. I just focused on going to hospital, getting my chemo, doing my schoolwork, going to hospital, getting my chemo, doing my schoolwork, and that's all I did for 6 months. And I didn't actually think about, oh, gee, I've actually got cancer. It didn't even hit me until every so often, but really after I finished is when I sort of started to, oh my goodness, I just beat cancer. And I didn't even think about that. I didn't even process that emotionally. And so I would say, like, if anyone else is sort of my age or something goes through a similar experience, it can be, it's quite a unique experience for everyone. Everyone reacts a bit differently. I know mum sort of at the start was a little bit more emotional, but then later maybe I was more emotional. So it's a very unique experience. I think anyone who goes through that should just know that you're going to process it in your own way, and that's okay. It doesn't matter.
How important is the role of the parents?
The role of parents is very important because, as I said, if everyone processes it in their own way, but the parents are the ones who are going to have to be there and be there for their child and sort of console them, take them to appointments if they're sick, or they're the ones who might be cleaning up the vomit or something like that. So the role of the parents is practical, and they're helping you get places and taking care of you, but also emotional, and they're helping you sort of work through what is just a crazy experience.
I think the hardest thing for us was, because I'd gone through it, I didn't want to push what I'd been through to him, because I knew it was going to be his own experience. So that was really hard as a mum. I couldn't tell him. Like, when we got the phone call, worst phone call of our life, that night from the paediatrician, and when he said, "Is George next to you?" I knew what that meant. And he told us over the phone that, "You'll be going to the Children's Hospital tomorrow, meeting with an oncology team, and it looks like it's very advanced." Processing that, I call it white noise. You watch it in the movies, it's true. Like, he's talking. I just heard white noise. George was continued the conversation, my husband continued the conversation with the doctor, and it was the white noise before I started hyperventilating. I was like, I can't do this. Our family can't go through this again. We've done it once, it's not fair. Like, why again? I was happy. When I got diagnosed with cancer, after I processed the shock of having cancer, and I don't want to die because my kids are so young, making silly jokes to my husband that if you remarry, I'm going to haunt you, all the things you do when you get diagnosed with cancer. Once I got over that initial shock, I said, you know what, that's okay, because they're not my kids. because I can't watch my kids go through anything like this. It's okay. If that's what God has given me, I'm all right. I could do this. But when he got diagnosed, it was like everything you see in the movies is true. That the way they portray that feeling of being told bad news is so true. And that's how I felt. I couldn't tell him. Like, I couldn't go in there and say, we have to go to the children's hospital because they think you got cancer. I couldn't do it. How do I tell my child you got cancer? So his dad did that.
How important faith is in all of this?
Oh, faith was a roller coaster.
We had the two very opposite reactions, Mum and me.
Yeah.
I know Mum was like, when I was first diagnosed, she was very questioning. She's, why God? Why my family? Why my son? And I think you could talk more to that. And so she started to, challenge her faith and whether or not she believed in God, because she's like, how could this happen? I do everything right. I go to church. I treat others right. How could you do this to my family? And then I think for me, I didn't connect with the faith element as much because I'm sort of a very sciencey person, and I just put my faith in my doctors, and I'm like,
it didn't change your view. Like you said, it didn't change. You didn't believe more or believe less. You just kept going.
I just kept going, and I guess for me, I did in some way just put my faith in my doctors and say to myself, well, they've trained their whole lives for this.
But I remember one day in the early days when we were in hospital, and I saw you do the sign of the cross, and in the hospital, they got the bed, and then you have like this curtain and a couch, and I had the couch half pulled. Maybe because he was sick of seeing my face after day in, day out. So I had it half pulled. I looked over and I saw him do the sign of the cross, and he did that. And I was like, I think it was in that moment where I probably thought, if he could do that, I need to start believing in my faith. Because those first initial weeks, I did question my faith. And I was like, why would God do? Because it was like I was blaming God for doing this, even though my logical mind knows God did not give us cancer. But that's how I felt, because through adversity in life, I always turn to God. We do. We should be turning to God every day. But during adversity, we tend to pray that little bit harder. And I couldn't pray. I tried. Like in that initial, I tried to pray. I couldn't pray. I tried to go to church. I couldn't go to church. And I said to George, I think I'm broken. I think my religion is actually broken. I can't do it. And he goes, give yourself time. You're angry. I remember our parish priest calling to check in, and I got really angry on the phone with him. I was like, this God that you're talking about. And he was like, you're allowed to feel angry. Just give it time. It all comes with time. And then I remember one day after one of those trips, I woke up and I said, I'm going to church today. George was, oh, okay. So I went, and I was going to the Roman Catholic Church, just this little parish near our house. Should have gone to Lebanese church because they never close. I didn't know that the Roman Catholic Church closes on a Monday, so I went in and doors are closed. And I went home. I think God's upset with me. He didn't open his doors. Anyway, the next day I still got up and I went to church. And it was the first time in my life that I prayed with all my heart. And anyone that's prayed with all their heart will know what I mean. When I knelt, Allah yarhamu Dad, I felt he's passed away now 9 years ago?
16?
Yeah, about 8-9 years ago. I felt his presence, like I actually felt warmth. And I said the Our Father and I opened my hands, and I felt warmth. And in that moment, even though I knew it was going to be hard, I knew it was going to be okay. But that took a few weeks to get over the anger.
The question we all ask each other or ourselves is, why me?
Why me?
And definitely that's the first question you ask yourself. So the why me is something that helped, is something that you found, or is something that remains, or how do you relate to it, or how do you identify to it?
I think doing this, and back when I had cancer, doing the fundraising I did. So I started doing fundraising. Maybe that's why me. Maybe because I'm a very open person. I'm not embarrassed to talk about what I went through, the challenges I went through. I'm not. I say it. And I know that people go through, and that's fine. People will go through cancer and they don't want to talk about it, and that's fine too, because everybody's different. I'm a very open person. I find when I talk about this stuff, I feel better. it helps like lighten the load. So maybe that's why me. Maybe back then when I got it, I was able to give back and raise funds for cancer. And you know, when someone stops me and says, oh, I read an article, an interview you did, and it made me feel like it's going to be okay, what I'm going through. Maybe that's why me. Maybe me doing that has given that person. And that's why I felt that this book was really important, because we talk a lot about what we were feeling.
There are a lot of people, but it's sort of a small percentage of people who will sort of go through this experience and then come out on the end of it, write a book, and then, you know, almost help guide others who are also going through the experience. And so if you ask the question, why me or why us, maybe the answer is because we're the kind of people who would go through something like this and then think, oh gee, we should write a book, or how can we give back to the community? What fundraisers can we do? I know coming out of cancer, I became an advocate for donating blood because I needed, I think, 7 or 8 blood transfusions during my time of chemo. So I started to give speeches at school to the staff, to the students about my story and why they should donate blood. And so I became an advocate for that, given my experience. And so when people like us go through a journey like this, we come out on the other side and we're able to do so much more good, and it gives it a bit of purpose.
Do you believe that the cancer pushed your maturity?
Oh, definitely.
Faster?
I would not be like, my life would not be nearly the same today, even though the chemo's done, cancer's gone. My life would not be nearly the same today if I hadn't of had it. And I think it's probably the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I think throughout my life, the worst points in my life, just in general, there hasn't been too many, but the worst points have often turned into the best things. I just didn't notice it in the moment, but it was an opportunity to change my perspective, to learn something new.
So you believe everything happens for a reason?
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
So tell me about the book now. So the book is a learning curve. The book is a feeling good, talking about things that happen. The book is a learning for someone who is passing, who would pass through the same thing.
Yeah.
What is the book?
Yeah, so the book's all that. It's not just a cancer story. We say that it's someone that's had to deal with hardship. You know, if you're struggling in life, we had our book launch last week, and our hashtag on social since we released the book has been hope, strength, perspective.
Just should interject here and say it is a memoir, so we're sort of writing about our experience in the hospital and going through cancer. But
yes, but back to that. But you could relate it. You could relate it to say hope, strength, perspective. So the reason we came up with those 3 words was my husband's got a marketing background, so he was like, "Give me 3 words, quick, give me 3 words that sum up your book," because it's all about how we're self-published, so we've got to get it out there somehow. And they rolled off my tongue. And he was like, "You don't think it's resilience?" I go, "Yeah, we've got resilience, but I think perspective." Because I talk about my perspective. There are moments where I'm falling apart, yet he's saying, "Oh, Mum, it's fine." Like, he developed a condition because of the chemo called avascular necrosis of the bones, where the bones die because the steroids were killing his bones. So he was in agony. That to me was the end of the world. To him, he was just happy to be given, what's the word, a diagnosis. Like for the doctors to say, this is what the pain is. Okay, I'm right now. You know what it is? I'm right. But me, as a mum, my perspective is, what does it mean for my child moving forward? So perspective is important. And I think that it doesn't matter what you're going through. This book does teach perspective. So in the book launch, George spoke about hope and how the different charities gave us hope. The Children's Hospital and the doctors gave us hope. I spoke about strength, how we find strength in places we didn't know we had. And Sebastian spoke about perspective. And I think this book gives you perspective.
It's kind of one of the unique points about this book, because it is written from both of our points of view. And there are some books like that, but not many, particularly not many memoirs like that. So when you read this book, something that you don't get, which you might get from another sort of story, is that, like Mum said, you go through the same experience, and Mum takes this thing away, and I take something completely different away, even though we went through the exact same set of circumstances. and it's you sort of wonder, well, how can that happen? And it kind of just, it's a reflection of who we are as people, like, and our personalities, but also our mindset and what we value, I guess. So when Mum was worried about whether or not God was still there with her, and I was maybe worried about the treatment, but it's fine. It's just two different ways of looking at it.
Yeah. And then we've got a chapter also about things we learnt along the way. Like after 6 months of treatment, sometimes it was 4 months into our treatment where we discovered another charity that might help with something that we were learning along the way. So a little boy was diagnosed from the same school soon after. Well, Sebastian had just finished treatment, and then this little boy was diagnosed. We live a street apart. Kind of knew the mum hi bye, but being able to say to her, okay, right, you need to contact this person, this person, this person, this person, because they're really going to help you. I discovered that 3 or 4 months into treatment, and she was able to get that on day one. And she said, you know how much pressure you took off me that day when you sat with me and just talked, because her head was spinning. So, you know, we've got a chapter about all the things we discovered and the charities we discovered were important. Even the blood bank, which, you know, lifeblood has always been there. George has always donated blood. But to actually need your child to get blood, receive blood, to actually live, like the importance of that, we want people to know the importance of that. So if you're young and you're fit and you're healthy, go out and donate blood. Because God forbid one day your family member might need it. And
something like 1 in 3, I probably shouldn't say this because I don't know the quote exactly, but like 1 in 3 people need blood at
some point in their life.
So.
And most of the blood donations do go to cancer patients, I think. Yeah.
Let's talk about George.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about a father having to live with that twice, seeing the people in front of him or the family probably going to leave him. How did the father react?
Yeah, so George, when I got sick, was very quiet, actually scared me because he doesn't show emotion. Actually, he's very affectionate, but he doesn't show sad emotion. I could count the times in my life, or in my time with him, that I've seen him show emotion, and once was at the book launch last week, and that's something everybody there said, we don't see that, because he's always been the pillar for the family. You know, when we were given Sebastian's diagnosis, I was literally hyperventilating. And he said, just stay in here. We were in his study, and he goes, just stay in here for as long as you need. I'll go speak to him because he needs to know. He knows something's going on. He needs to know. I'll go speak to him. And I actually didn't know what happened. I never asked him until I read the book. And Sebastian wrote about the moment George walked into his room and what happened. But I was too scared to even ask him because he was so strong. I didn't want him to break because I needed him to be strong. It was a relief for me that he was so strong through both our diagnosis. And we've got 2 other boys that he needed to be there for. Sebastian and I spent a lot of time in hospital, and he was there for the other 2 boys. Like, they still needed parents around, you know. Jerome was turning 18, Elijah was 12, 11. Yeah. He had his 11th birthday on day 1 of chemo. Was that right? Did I get the right year? Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right.
His 11th birthday on day 1 of chemo in the hospital. And it was Good Friday.
So the Royal Children's have their Good
They have a
Friday
fundraiser. And it was just very ironic because how many times we've watched that. I don't know if you know anything about the Good Friday appeal. It's huge here. And they raise lots of funds for that day. And every year we watch it. It's on Good Friday. You go to church, you watch the Good Friday appeal. It's just tradition. We're watching it from inside the hospital. It was just like so surreal that day.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. It was a very, very interesting day because I was kind of just like fascinated by all the procedural stuff that were going on, and they're like, okay, first we need to put this cream on you, and then we're going to stick you with this needle. I'm like, oh wow, this is very fascinating. And I think, but Mum had a sort of different take on it. I actually don't know what you're thinking, to be honest. But I remember throughout that day we had the TV on, and we could see the reporters in the hospital, outside the hospital, like, oh my goodness, we're right there. It's like, wow. And so it was kind of this moment where, like, for our whole lives, we'd watch this Good Friday appeal and we're like, okay, you know, we should donate to help the sick kids. And then all of a sudden you're the sick kid, and it's like now it's everyone else's turn to help me, and it's like this almost full circle moment.
Yeah. What I felt that day was fear. That's all I could think. And I was trying to put this brave face on because he couldn't see me scared, because I don't want to scare him. He was 15. And it was probably a good thing that it was a Good Friday appeal that day, because there was a lot going on. They released the COVID rules for the day to let the family in because there was so much going on. So, 11-year-old that's very excited about his birthday comes in and distracts all of us because there's all these football players downstairs on the ground floor, and he was just excited. So it was just a nice distraction, I think, from what I was feeling on the day, because I didn't know how well I was masking that fear.
Post-cancer, do you believe it's a battle that you can win against cancer, or cancer can win against you? Is it, does the mind have a lot to do with it?
Cancer could still beat you after it's cured. Like Sebastian said, it's when it's all over that you think, oh my God, I actually had cancer. And, that post-traumatic stress could kick in at that point. Every doctor's appointment makes you nervous. Sebastian had a severe itch. That was his only symptom of cancer. Like, he was ripping his skin. So if you go like this, you'll straight away see me like ping. He's like, well, what's wrong? Why are you scratching? He's like, Mum, I've got product in my hair, relax. But that could consume you, and it did consume me for a long time after his treatment. It was like 2 or 3 months after his treatment. Cancer could have won after he was cured if I didn't go out and seek the help. Now, I had cancer and I never got therapy. Like, I never went and saw a psychologist or went and got any kind of therapy. After he finished, when I was yelling at shop assistants for stupid reasons, things that I would laugh at people for doing, I was like, I need help, because cancer is actually beating me now. Because I was a ticking time bomb, and I should be happy that my son was cancer free, and thank God he was starting to look healthy again and look like his old self. But I was broken. I felt like I was keeping it together because I had to, and then I kind of fell apart. So I did. I went and I did a session with other parents, and just to know that what I was feeling was normal and I was allowed to feel that way. And they gave me techniques on how to get over these fears. Not get over these fears, you don't get over the fears, but how to live with these fears. So cancer didn't win. It didn't win when Sebastian was sick, it didn't win when I was sick, and it didn't win afterwards with the mind games that it can play with you.
Do you believe that, or would you ask anyone who had cancer to go out there, help, support? If we're back to everything happens for a reason, it happened with you for a reason or another, probably only God knows about. Would you invite everyone to go out there and speak about it, because it can be or make a difference with others people's lives?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because it's quite, as I said, an individual thing, and certain people just would not, as Mum said, just would not feel comfortable, sharing that. But if you're the kind of person who feels okay with that, well then I think it's one of the greatest things that you can do, because your story can show other people that, first of all, they're not alone. Whether they've been diagnosed with cancer or, another sort of chronic illness or something, or that they know someone is going through something, your story can connect with them and sort of give them a new perspective, a new outlook. And just that whole idea of being able to connect with other people over a shared experience can be really comforting. So if you're able to, go out and share what you've been through and how it's changed you as a person, then I think that's an amazing thing. In terms of the fundraisers, we've done plenty since cancer. I've had Biggest Morning Tea, Run for the Kids for the Royal Children's Hospital.
People get sick of us because we're always flooding our social media. Hey guys, we're doing another fundraiser. But it's because we're so passionate about it. Like with the Children's Hospital, I'd experienced it for trivial things when my kids were little, tonsils and, real trivial small surgeries. And I saw how much it's grown in the years my children, from when they were born to now. And I see where the money went. Like, this is world-class hospital. Your money, the facilities in there is world-class. The doctors are world-class. So yes, I'm going to get passionate behind it. But not everybody likes to be out there. And that's fine. Everyone's individual. And if it's not publicly speaking or writing a book, which not everybody can do, find your thing. I think find your thing. Be it a little morning tea fundraiser where you're speaking with a smaller group. It doesn't have to be a big super event, but it might be something. I think you've got to find your thing. You've got to find, I always say you might not see the reason why something's happened in that moment, but one day you will. And when you do find that thing, that's when you heal. Because the healing afterwards is not easy. And on the surface, you know, we're confident people, and on the surface we might look fine, but it's like underwater, our legs are paddling to stay afloat. So yeah, I do think that if you do find your thing, it will help with your healing, and it doesn't have to be publicly speaking. It could be something else.
Back to the book, your favourite part?
My favourite part, I think everyone's going to start getting sick of this page, but at the end, in the last 2 pages of the book, where is it?
Simply Put.
Simply Put
is the chapter.
Is what it's called, and it's the last 2 pages, and it's just a sort of summary of the experience, what it was like for me, and almost what I learned from it, what I gained from that, and I like that stands out to me so much because it shows people in a way why we wrote this book. It shows how our journey through cancer helped us to grow as people, and it shows us how it was, if you just even look at the title, the worst.
Did you agree
the
on
best year.
Oh wow, that was a.
It took us forever to come up with that, but
the book was finished.
It really helps you sort of understand why exactly we chose this title, because at first you think you had cancer. That was the worst. No, it wasn't the worst. It was the best year, because whilst the experiences may have been traumatic, what you learn from that trauma is what stays with you for life, and it's what helps you to grow as a person. So
we had a list.
It gives you a bit of an insight into our thinking.
So we had a list of names. There was about 20 different titles. Nothing stuck, like nothing stuck. And then one day the cousins were all over and they're bouncing ideas. Which one do you like? Which one do you like? And someone said, what about his speech? So his speech at his 16th birthday, which was soon after treatment, and we invited more people than a wedding.
It was about
160 people in the
150
house.
all over at our house.
So we wanted to celebrate. So anybody that dropped off a lasagna was at his 16th birthday. Sebastian gives a speech. And his speech was, you might be thinking, you know, he talks about what he went through, and you might be thinking this was the worst year of my life, but I think it was the best year of my life. And everyone was like, wow. He was like just turned 16. And then one of the cousins, and I don't know who to give credit to, so we're just going to say we're not giving credit to anybody. One of the cousins said, what about like play with the words about the worst best year or the best worst year? And it was like we all kind of threw up those ideas, and that's how we came up with that. And we're like, yes, that's it. Yeah.
Buying the book would help you do another book, help you go places.
Another book.
What are we going to write the next book? I hope I never have to write a memoir.
It was
like
a very logistical nightmare writing a book.
I think we're just happy to get story out.
Yeah.
But if you pick up this book, so George chose the paper, the cover and everything in there. So, you know, when you pick it up and you compare this to any book you've read, usually it's a brown paper, it's a bit thinner, it's a very glossy. No, my husband wants to make something schmick. He just wants a beautiful piece. He goes, we're not making money out of this. He goes, what we're doing is we're trying to help other families. And he goes, I'm so proud of both of you. I want a beautiful piece. So he chose the most expensive paper, the most expensive cover. Like, it's the whitest. We laugh about how white, because when we got our first draft, I touched my face with makeup when I touched it, and straight away you see my makeup on the book. So I was like, well, if your paper wasn't so white. So writing this book will, I think, just continue helping for the healing. I think when people come up to us, I don't know about you, Bas, but when people come up to us, up to me and says, you know, I read your book and, you know, it just made me see perspective. I was feeling sad and, you know, you just gave me a bit of strength. That helps with my healing. So I think that's what buying our book will do for us.
Yeah, when you buy it, I don't think you should think about, oh, we're going to support a cause with our money, but rather think about you're buying a story, and you're buying our story. And for us, Mum said those 3 words: hope, strength, perspective. It might give you 1, 2, or all 3 of those things when you read it. Or maybe, you want to buy a book like this because you want to give it to someone else who's going through something, and you want to give them some strength or some perspective. And so I think, the whole point of getting this book to read would be about buying our story and sort of getting to experience that.
Last and most important, probably, as an end note, what would be your what would you say to people or to families? How would you keep a family united the way you kept your family united? What did you learn? What are the things you would like to tell us or teach us?
As soon as you said that, first thing that came to my mind, I think it's the 2nd chapter, or it's my 1st chapter that I write. And it's the shortest chapter of the book because it was about my mum's experience with cancer, and I didn't remember much from the time. That the one main thing I wrote about in that chapter was that when Mum got sick and she had to shave off her hair because it was going to fall out, that was a sort of an emotional thing for her because she'd taken so much pride in her hair and how it looked and her curls and all that stuff. So when she did that, our whole family all got shaved heads as well. And so in our living room, there's this photo of all of us with our shaved heads. And it was sort of a thing where we came together as a family and we all shaved our heads in solidarity with her to show her that, yes, she was the one getting the chemo, but it was something that we shared as a family. The cancer affected the entire family. And so when I got sick and I started losing my hair, all my uncles and everyone, even the extended family, all got buzz cuts, and some of them even, I think, went bald. But,
some of them went shiny.
It was sort of that whole thing again of, yes, the cancer is affecting one person directly, but it's an experience that the whole family feels. And so all you need to do is show them that you're there for them, and that if they want to talk, you're there. If they need some support, whatever it is, you're there to listen, and it's just about being together.
I think the most important thing, as say for a couple, this breaks families. I was in the chemo ward speaking to mums. Like, I went on a mums retreat and I spoke to mums and I heard lots of different stories, and it wasn't our story. It was just so different. I think what was different about our story? Our story was different because I was taking my frustration out on George. I was in the hospital with Sebastian. Sebastian was taking his frustration out on me. But I just kept we kept reminding ourselves that we're angry with the person, we're not angry with that person, we're angry with the situation. I wasn't angry with George, and Sebastian wasn't angry with me. Or maybe sometimes he was angry with me. But it was just keep reminding yourself that we're angry with the situation and it's not a personal attack. So we had to keep reminding ourselves, because you do take out your anger. He'd get upset with me and I'd storm out, and George wasn't allowed into the hospital because of COVID. So I'd take out all that frustration out on him. But we just kept reminding each other how much we loved each other throughout that. And it got us through. And that thing about, shaving their heads in support was George and Elijah my youngest Elijah and George kept their head shaved for the whole of Sebastian's treatment. Because as long as he didn't have hair, they didn't want hair. And I don't know what it is about that. It's hair. It's it's not important, but it just did something to help with that support. So there's different ways to show support, Someone saying, let's go out for a coffee, and I say no, and they say, I'm outside, we're going for a coffee, you need to get out. That keeps you going, There's lots of ways to show support. And I think it's really important to just keep remembering that underneath, we love each other. Cancer's not going to break our family. We love each other. Yeah.
Buy the book?
Yeah. Show them the book.
Buy the book. It's a beautiful cover. I'll tell you something about this cover. This corridor at the hospital was never empty, ever. So it was always like those doors were always open, close, patients, doctors, parents. And that day, I can't even remember if we spent the night in the hospital and we were going for an early morning chemo, so that was where we'd go for chemo. And we were walking and it just looked lonely. He looked lonely. And it pretty much summed up how you feel. You feel so lonely when you're going through this. And he was just gazing out the window. I pulled out my camera, I took a photo, and he heard it. I turned around and he goes, "Why'd you do that?" I said, "I just wanted to capture that moment." And he was like, "Oh, okay," and he kept walking. So when we were trying to decide on a cover, George sent me a photo of a boy on a rock, and he goes, "What about something like this, maybe on a rock or at the beach?" And I was like, "Nah, this is not Photoshopped, the hands are blurry, the face is a little bit blurry." I was like, "This just captures it, there's nothing." I was like, "It's a bit blurry," and I was like, "No, you know what, it doesn't matter that it's a bit blurry, it kind of really captures."
I really like it because we got here's the chemo ward, and it's just like me just confronting it head on, and that kind of is in line with like my whole take on the experience, just confronting it head on and pushing through.
Yeah.
May God protect you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you.